Welcome to the OMG Tarot podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay, aka OMG Tarot. I bet you didn't expect 2 episodes to drop this week, did you? But 'tis the season, and I put together this bonus episode as a gift to you. Are you familiar with the Happy Squirrel? If you've played around with a lot of decks, or if you're a Simpsons fan, you might be, because that's where the Happy Squirrel comes from, an episode of The Simpsons. I'd love to play you a clip from the episode, but because I don't have the licensing to do that, I'll have to paraphrase. It's Season 6, Episode 17. The episode is called Lisa's Wedding. In the episode, the Simpson family is at a Renaissance fair, and at one point, Lisa wanders off into some dark woods. She finds an ominous-looking tent, and when she goes inside, she finds a woman who's reading tarot cards. At first, Lisa's skeptical, but the tarot card reader says things that there's no way she could have possibly known. So she pulls a few cards for Lisa. First, she pulls the death card, which elicits an but then she assures Lisa that no, the death card means transformation and it's actually a good thing, so Lisa's reassured. Then the fortune teller pulls the second card. It's the Happy Squirrel. Lisa thinks it's cute, but the tarot card reader gasps and the music becomes very dramatic. Lisa asks if that's bad, and the dramatic music stops. The tarot card reader shrugs and says possibly, the cards are vague and mysterious. Then the plot continues from there and we see the rest of the episode. But after this episode aired, the Happy Squirrel became an inside joke among tarot card readers. Artists began adding it to decks, and that's how I came across this card for the first time. Somebody gifted me a copy of the Art Postcard Tarot, and as I was looking through it the first time, I came across a Happy Squirrel card, and I was like, what's this? This is weird. That's not a tarot card. So I googled it, and I found out about the Simpsons episode and the whole community in-joke that the Happy Squirrel is. And I was a Simpsons fan for a long time. I must have seen this episode at some point, but I just didn't remember. I think that when I was actively watching The Simpsons regularly, I wasn't a tarot card reader yet. Beyond the Art Postcard Tarot, a few other popular decks contain a Happy Squirrel card. One is the Wooden Tarot, and another is the Touchstone Tarot. There are probably a bunch more that I'm just not aware of. So if you have one of these decks, how do you interpret the Happy Squirrel in it? That's not a rhetorical question. There is an empirical answer to it, and we're about to get into it. When it's numbered, the Happy Squirrel is number 23 in the Major Arcana, which implies that there's a card number 22, which would exist between the world and the Happy Squirrel. Maybe we'll find that elusive card someday. Although the Simpsons episode didn't elaborate on a meaning for this card, over time, the tarot community developed a meaning for it. That meaning is that you're doing a lot of prepping for the future, potentially to the point of doing too much prepping, and that you're not allowing things to unfold naturally. So why is that? Where did tarot card readers pull this from? A big part of it is the symbolism of the card itself. It's the Happy Squirrel, and what do squirrels do? They gather up acorns and other nuts, and they sock them away in their nests so that way they can feed themselves over the winter. Squirrels are great planners. They know that when winter comes, they're not going to be able to find their food sources, and if they want to see spring, they have to plan and prep now. So that's a great thing, right? It's prudent. It's responsible. We should plan for the future. So where does this idea of doing too much planning come in? Well, that comes from what the tarot card reader in the Simpsons episode said, how she shrugged and threw up her hands and said, but the cards act in mysterious ways. So readers have taken these two ideas, one of the squirrel prudently socking away all of its acorns to survive the winter, and the other of the cards work in mysterious ways, to find what do we get when we combine these ideas. And the combined idea is that sometimes it's possible to over-prep and to try and control every single variable before you even know what variables you're going to face. And I think this is just a really interesting commentary on reading tarot cards in general. The cards can help you out, and the cards can provide you valuable insight, but the cards are just a tool. They shouldn't be running your life for you. So when the Happy Squirrel comes up in a tarot card reading, typically you'd read it as, don't take it so seriously. It's not that deep. Live your life. If you're working with a deck that includes a Happy Squirrel card, check the guidebook to see what the artist intended for that card to mean. It is still a relatively new entry to the tarot deck, and so people have different ideas over how to interpret it, and if it should be interpreted at all. Because once you start getting away from the traditional 78 cards, you're getting away from what makes a tarot deck a specific thing versus other oracle decks. Because if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably in the cartomancy world, and you're probably familiar with oracle decks. You might even have a few. You might even prefer oracle to tarot decks. As just a real quick and dirty, an oracle deck is any kind of deck that you can do divination with. So there are angel card decks, there are decks that are themed around different pantheons from history and cultures around the world. There are decks themed to things like trees and mushrooms and animals. And sometimes they're not even really meant for divination as much as they're meant to act as like a daily affirmation or something like that. Some readers even use both an oracle deck and a tarot deck in their practice. I never really got too into oracle decks. Pretty much once I found tarot, that kind of stuck in my craw, and I've been specifically a tarot card reader ever since. But I have a few. I have one deck that is all these cute anime girls with little animals, and I have a copy of the Gypsy Witch fortune-telling deck, which I should pop that open and try it out a bit. I know that's a Lenormand deck, so that's another system, but it's always good to expand your repertoire. Getting back to it, you can make the argument that a deck that doesn't adhere to your traditional 78 card set isn't really a tarot deck, and for the most part, that's the working definition I use. However, what do you do when you come across a deck that doesn't replace your traditional 78 cards, but simply adds a few onto them? I would still group that as a tarot deck. Maybe I'd call it an enhanced tarot deck or a tarot deck plus. Because I've seen other decks that add on to the traditional 78. Notably, I don't remember which deck this is, but one of my friends has it. It's your standard deck, but it has 4 lovers cards. And the difference between them is that they all depict different kinds of couples. And now I'm not sure if when you work with this deck, are you supposed to just choose one lover's card and set the other 3 aside? Or are you supposed to play with all 4 of them in the deck, essentially bringing you to 81 cards? Because then you're getting into changing up the probability of drawing a specific card. And you could possibly, let's say you're doing a 4-card pull, you could potentially pull all 4 lovers cards, and that's the spread. You got the lovers times 4. I'll have to ask her what that deck's guidebook says regarding the 4 different lovers cards, because typically a deck's guidebook will tell you how to handle the different deviations in that deck. Just like if you have a deck with a Happy Squirrel card, the guidebook is most likely going to tell you how you're meant to interpret it. This is also the case for reading reversals or not. Sometimes if you check a deck's guidebook, the artist will tell you this deck is meant to be read without reversals, or this deck is meant to be read with reversals. Usually, I'm not a reversal reader. However, if a deck's artist specified that their work is meant to be read with reversals, I'll read according to what the artist intended. And of course, there's no hard and fast rule that you absolutely have to read according to what somebody laid out in a book. It is your deck, your practice, your intuition after all. But a lot of times, tarot artists are readers themselves, and when they design a deck, they have a vision in mind for how they want that deck to be used. And sometimes that vision deviates even further from your traditional 78 cards than just adding a Happy Squirrel. 2 great examples of this are the Carnival at the End of the World Tarot and the Tarot of the Drowning World. These decks were both created by artist team Nicholas Kahn and Richard Selesnik, and they're a few of my favorites. I know in the most recent episode I mentioned the Carnival at the End of the World, and I recently picked up Tarot of the Drowning World, and they're both gorgeous. I love them both so much. One thing that makes these 2 decks unique among tarot decks is they both include what's known as the insubordinate arcana. Now, to give a little context, these decks were both created out of art installations that the designers put on. And so there's a story that goes with them, and basically the story is that the carnival at the end of the world is this absurdist carnival that's put on by a troupe of travelers who are kind of outcasts, and they each represent an underlying force. So now, with 6 of these cards in the Carnival at the End of the World, that brings us to an 84-card deck. and with 5 of them in the Tarot of the Drowning World, we're at an 83 card deck. In these cases, I consider the insubordinate arcana kind of like an add-on or an enhancement. They're meant to be read with the rest of the deck, so I keep them shuffled in. And when one of these cards comes up, I read it as kind of a bit of a bonus, a bit of an extra push in the direction of whichever card we've pulled. So for example, in the Carnival at the End of the World deck, one of these cards, the Tempest, represents strong energy that you're meant to use constructively. Let's say I pulled that card out along with the Eight of Cups. I might read that as Eight of Cups energy, so you're leaving things behind and you're actively choosing to start a new chapter and move away from a lot of the emotionally charged things that you faced in the past. But now with the Tempest, that's an extra boost, that's an extra, yeah, go do it, pushing you toward that. I think that when deck creators add new cards to their decks like this, it's kind of a cool way to play with what's already there and innovate. And I think it's really cool that deck creators saw the Happy Squirrel card in The Simpsons and chose to run with it. And then now here we are, years and years later, to the point that the Happy Squirrel is an established thing. We have a new tarot card in the Major Arcana. Maybe it's not official and maybe it's not in most decks, but among readers in our community, it's a thing that we all understand the meaning of. I just think that's really cool and speaks to how we're the ones who create meaning. The tarot can inform us and guide us, but remember, the tarot was created by humans. We're the ones who identified those archetypes and illustrated them into a deck of 78 images. So, when you play with your cards and you do readings for yourself and for others, remember that you're the one in the driver's seat. You're the one interpreting and using your intuitive powers to understand the meaning. So, trust yourself. Try not to second guess what you're reading into the cards you've pulled. Give yourself room to explore and understand and to be wrong, because you're not going to get it right every single time. Nobody does. But one of the best pieces of tarot advice I ever received is that it's better to be wrong than to be vague. So, read with confidence, even if that means being confidently wrong. You can always take a look back at mistakes you've made and understand why you made those mistakes and correct them. But if you were so vague that you couldn't be right or wrong in the first place, there's really not room for improvement. So, make improvement part of your goal for next year. Or not, I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I think that's always a good goal. And hey, maybe embracing Happy Squirrel energy in 2025 will help you stick to that goal. Thanks for listening, everybody. That about wraps our discussion on the Happy Squirrel. I know some readers take it out of their decks if they have a deck that has one, and others keep it in play. I'm in that second category. I'm personally a big fan of the Happy Squirrel because I really like the disruptive nature of it, and I like how it's a reminder that tarot is essentially a living document. It's something that keeps getting redrawn and reinterpreted by different artists all over the world, each putting their own twist on it. And those artists apparently include the people who animated The Simpsons. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because at least if you're listening on Spotify, there is a comment section, and I'd like to hear. What do you think about the Happy Squirrel? Do you read it? Do you take it out of your deck? Maybe you've never even seen it before. And if that's the case, would you seek out a deck that has it? Or a deck that has other bonus cards, like the Carnival at the End of the World, or the Tarot of the Drowning World? Let me know your thoughts. I want to hear them. And if you have thoughts about this podcast that can be quantified into a 5-star rating, leave me one of those. So now for real this time, I'm signing off, and I won't be podcasting again until January 16th, 2025. It's been a wonderful ride with you all, and I hope you all have a fantastic start to the new year. See you in January!